Hello and welcome back, I'm ShyWizard. I'm going to take a look at a couple of placeable mods and put together a tutorial here for FS17. I was made aware of these mods very recently, but no links were given to the actual mods themselves, so I just did a Google search and found a couple of different sites to get them from. I can't remember which ones it was, Modland I think it was, or something like that. I may have a different version than the version that was mentioned in the actual comment of a previous video, but I think the outcome will probably be along the same lines. Now, I've already downloaded them. I won't put links in the description because, like I say, there are many different sites that came up when I did my Google search. They all appeared to be the same version, but I only downloaded the one of each, I think from the same site anyway. But the mods I'm actually going to be looking at here in the video are the whiskey placeable and the barrel placeable. Now these work together. You require the barrels to put into the whiskey placeable to then, do all its bits and pieces and give you, in this particular case, whiskey and rum. But when I actually opened these mods up and had a look through them, I would imagine, are map exports and then made into a placeable. I don't know that for sure. The actual author of these particular mods, both of them, are the Snake. It may have been something that was implemented into a map that he's created and then decided to make placeables of them, and for whatever reason included a lot of extra stuff in the actual mod itself, the placeable mod, that isn't really, well, not really, isn't required at all by the mod itself. We have a lot of extra folders and files in here, fill planes and things like that, like fish food, pig food. The actual mods themselves don't require any of those. We have a material holder which is not required by the mod, and various other different things in here that this particular mod, and also with the whiskey mod, exactly the same kind of deal here. We have a lot of fill planes again, exactly the same as what we did with the other one, the barrel one, and again with different material holders and whatever else. No idea why they are there. It's possible that these particular mods were designed to do something else and then were edited to do whatever they are now. So this one would be whiskey. This may have started off as a fish factory, for example, and it was then converted into a whiskey factory. I don't know. And the other remaining textures and things like that were just never removed. Not sure on that, can't say. But for the video here, I want to do a Giants editor import into a map, and I'm not comfortable with bringing all of these textures that aren't required by the mod itself into a map. If you were going to be potentially bringing these objects into a map that you were then going to upload to a share site or the mod hub or whatever else, I think that this would be flagged as a no-no, because you've got, as I say, just a lot of stuff in here that is not required by the mod itself or the map for that matter. So why would you want to bring it into the map to start with? So I've done this video like 3 times already, I think now, and each time I've done it I've decided to do it a different way. I was really hoping to do it in one hit to get both of the factories into the map in one particular video, but each time I've done it and then watched the videos back, I've not been happy with the end results. Some of it's been a little bit rushed and whatever else to get it into a single video and to try and make that video as short as possible. I think in one particular recording session it was over 2.5 hours long, and even with editing it was still extremely long. So I'm going to try and split this up a little bit and do it in sections, in parts. So with that said, I think the first part what I'm going to do is talk about a little bit of, not necessarily optimization, but streamlining these particular mods at least. Most placeable mods they download to do with the fabric script or M Company, or particularly those ones, but any particular mod, generally speaking, you only end up with what is required by the mod in the folder. You don't generally have all these other parts in there that the mod doesn't need. I don't know why in this particular case, as I said already, why they're there, but whatever. So in this one, part 1 of this look at the two mods here. I'm going to do a video on streamlining these particular mods before we bring them into the map. So I'm going to start with the barrel mod first of all, and then I'm just going to basically get rid of all of the extra files and textures and whatever else that this particular mod does not require. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use Giants Editor export function to basically recreate this mod, but only with the parts that the mod actually requires. I'm going to rename a few things as well, because with any fabric script, you can't have two fabric script mods in the map with the same name, because it will cause a conflict. This is specifically to do with how it's named in the Cinegraph, but also in our user attributes we have a name here called fabric. And if I actually open up the whiskey one as well, just to show you, when we open this one up, it's called fabric here in the i3D, the same as the barrel mod. This one is named slightly differently in the actual Giants Editor Cinegraph here. We have our barrel fabric and whiskey fabric, but when we actually look in the user attributes, our name here is fabric for the whiskey placeable, and it's also fabric for the barrel placeable. So again, that's something that will need to be changed, because we will get conflicts otherwise, or at least I believe that's the case in the past when I've done a lot of fabric script stuff. If we have things named the same, it will then, in a Giants Editor import scenario, it will cause some conflicts. As placeables, they are an entity all of their own, so that is not necessarily the case, but in a Giants Editor map import, it will cause some problems. So what I want to do is, like I say, streamline this particular mod and the whiskey one, but I'm going to do the barrel one first here. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm just going to literally take everything from here, export it out into a completely new folder, and then I'm going to just rejiggle the i3D to point in different places for this streamlined textures and whatever else. So with that said, I'm going to go File, Export All with Files. Normally when I'd export something, I would select it and then go Export Selection with Files, but in this particular case I want to export everything from this particular mod. So I'm going to go Export All with Files. I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop here, and I'm just going to call this barrel fabric, and I'm going to make a copy of that. We'll open up the folder and paste it into there like so. I'm going to save it. I don't need to keep the parent directory structure because I'm going to be creating my own folder structure, so this is not particularly relevant. So I'm going to click no to that. I'm done with this, so I can close that down now. I will need to refer back to this particular folder because there will be some parts here that won't be brought out with the export particle systems palette, things like that, because they are external i3Ds that will be which will not be integrated into the main i3D. They will just be linked via path file names and XML file names and things like that. So we need to bring over some parts manually, but for the most part I will have the main building exported out now with a streamlined view to it. And if we actually bring them up side by side here, you can see in this one we have a lot of extra folders and files than this side. So this is on the left the original, and on the right we have our new exported streamlined version. So even though I've actually exported it and whatever else, and it is more streamlined, it's got a lot less folders because of the way the textures and everything have been placed in the structure of the original mod. It's going to copy that to a degree, and we do have a lot of extra folders and shaders and duplicates of this, that and all the rest of it. So I'm going to try and cut down on that as well. So what I want to try and do here is keep all of my textures in one folder, my shaders in another folder, my sounds in a separate folder, and then any shared textures in a completely separate folder also. So I'm going to open up the textures folder here, and then what I'm going to do is actually open up the same folder again, but in my root folder here, so I can just drag and drop what I need to copy over from each of the individual folders. So this is a little bit of optimization, but I'm going to call it streamlining because there will potentially be some duplicates between the two of these particular mods. So I'm going to bring in both the barrel mod and the whiskey mod as well. So there may be still some duplicates between the two of them when it comes to textures, but I'm not going to get into duplicate textures and stuff like that. I'm just streamlining the mods before I bring them into the map itself. But there is a little bit of optimization included in it as well. So if I open up these folders, we've got some textures in here. Again, you may find that there are duplicates, like we have two numbers diffuse here. So I don't need to bring that one over. I'm just going to bring the others over. I'm going to literally move them so I can see what I've taken and what I haven't taken. Otherwise, when I go through the folders, it might get a little bit confusing of what's there and what's not. So I'm just going to go through all these. You can see we've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 folders just to get to one texture. In my opinion, that's a little bit too much. So don't need that one. Let's go into here. And that is, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 folders to get to 4 textures. Again, in my opinion, that's far too many. So I want to bring these over. Will it let me do that now? Why is it not letting me do that? There we go. Sometimes you have to refresh the folder. I don't know why it does that, but whatever. So we'll go back. Shaders, shares, textures. Okay, so I want to bring this one over as well. So we'll just do like that. And paste. Select all. Control X. And paste. So let's just have a look. We've got, that's fine, models, done that one. So let's, what other shaders? That's fine. Yeah, we've done that one, shaders. So I'm going to copy, I'm going to actually cut these, so Control X, go back to my shaders folder, paste. Sounds, that's fine. Textures, that's fine. So I'm pretty sure we should have all of the parts there we need. So I'm going to close that one down. You may find that there will be some left over or whatever else, and you might need to add them in separately later on because we have a shared folder there. So I might actually cut that folder and bring that out here as well. So with our textures, that's fine. So we can delete that folder. Shaders, delete that folder. Just go through each folder in turn. I know I've done that one, so I can delete that one. Models, yeah, done that one. So I can delete that one. And I can delete that one. So we can delete all of those now. So I have, what I should end up with here is just the textures, the shared folders, shared files, shaders and sound file that I require, and nothing else. None of this extra stuff that we have from the original. Like I said before, there will be some particle systems and the palette itself and things like that that will need to be brought over, but because they are separate entities of their own, they're a separate i3D. They're just linked via certain path file names in the user attributes and things like that. They won't be brought out automatically with the export, so we need to bring them over separately or manually. Obviously the scripts and things like that we'll need to bring in manually, and when we get it into the map, that's when we'll start looking at the mod desk and stuff like that. But this video specifically is going to be about streamlining the mods themselves to start with before we actually get to the import stage. Okay, so what I need to do then is, with this one, is change the i3D, the path file names in the i3D, to point to my newly created textures, sound, shared, the actual folder structure that I've set up here. And I want to actually have that with a lowercase as well, like so. So we'll change that to a lowercase. Doesn't really matter, but I do like to have lowercase where possible. So what I'll do then is I'm going to open this up in Notepad++, and I will actually close that one down for now, just so I don't have too many folders open. And obviously all of my shaders have been put into one folder. So you can do a search for your shaders if you want to, and then just go through each one of them and whatever else, and just delete the appropriate parts. Like so, or you can just scroll down. I would probably say, because this is not a very big file name section, you could just scroll down and find them relatively easily. So we'll do just that. So I've got shaders, so I need to get rid of that. This will be a little bit time consuming, but it's just, you know, I think for the most part it is a good idea where possible. Before you actually bring it into your map, carry out a little bit of optimization, a bit of streamlining before then, so that it cuts down on what you have to do later on with locating long path file names, because your map i3D is going to be much larger for all of the parts than the individual mods that you're going to be bringing in. So if you can optimize them to start with before you import it into the map, it will make your life much easier later on. What I'm going to do then is with this, let's get rid of that, because I just want that to be textures. So we can get rid of that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that, and we'll highlight that entire section there, Control F, replace, and I want to replace that with textures, so I'm going to go replace all, and that will replace anything with that path file name to textures. And I can do the same with all of these as well. So if I take that line there, copy it, and then put that into there, replace all, and then I can come down. Just makes it a little bit easier because a lot of these are obviously going to be the same. So instead of me having to go through each one of them individually and override it, I can just use the replace function in Notepad++ here. So we'll copy that, put that into there, replace all. So that one we need to change manually, that's fine. So textures, textures, shaders, shaders. And then we've got a couple down here, shaders, textures, textures. I think they look okay. Okay, I think that's looking alright. So when we get through all of that, and I did change the sounds from a capital S to a lowercase, it would still find it, but it would give you a case sensitive error in your log or your console, depending on whether this is, it might not be loaded in through Giants Editor. It possibly would be because it's part of the i3D, but sometimes with sound files the error doesn't become apparent until you actually get it in the game, in some cases. So just be aware of that. You might not get an error in Giants Editor. It would only then become available, or the error would only show up once you get into game. So, but anyway, so I've done that. I'm going to save, and we'll just open up the i3D again here in Giants Editor and just see what errors we get. And we've got a couple here, so you can see here we've got shared dirt normal PNG. Well, I have a shared folder and it has a dirt normal in it, but what this is referring to is my shader. If I actually look in my shaders here, you'll see that there are a few in here, and one of these will have a path file name to dirt underscore normal. So you need to open these up. I know pretty well what shaders do what now, and this particular one doesn't have much in it, so you could just open them up individually and look for what you're trying to find, and then just change it to the appropriate part. Now, because it's referring to a shader, my shaders are in my shaders folder, obviously, but my shared texture, the dirt normal, is in my shared folder. So what I need to do is tell the path file name, the shader, to look in my shared folder. So I can't just put in there, whoops, I can't just have shared, because it will assume that the shared folder is in the same folder as my textures are, my shaders are, sorry, but it's not. It's in its own folder. So I need to put // in front of that to tell it to go back one folder from my shaders folder. So it goes back one folder and then looks in my shared folder to find this dirt normal PNG or DDS. So if I go ahead and save that, close that down, we'll close down the editor and then reopen it again. And now if I've done that successfully, we'll have no errors, so fantastic. Now what you could do here, it's up to you. I've got a few extra parts in here that I don't particularly want to bring into the map. We've got this rotator thing at the bottom, rotor, whatever you want to call that. I don't need that, it's not really relevant. You might want to do this before you do the export, original export, but sometimes it can, it doesn't always work that way, depending on the mod itself. So you may do the export first to see what's left behind, to then determine what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep. So I'm just going to go through here and find those parts. Now the actual rotor itself is controlled by a shader, so I know that that's going to be in my shaders tab here in the shader transform group in the Cinegraph, so I can highlight that and just delete it. I don't need it. The other parts I'm going to keep there, but the other bit I am going to get rid of is these Bowden plates, because I don't want them. There are some glitchy textures, I think, in one of these that I did notice when I was looking at this earlier on. Can't remember where it was now, but one of these has a bit of a glitchy texture. But yeah, that could be fixed, I guess, but I don't particularly like the look of that anyway, so for me I'm going to get rid of it. I would build something up as a placeable. It's a good idea to have some sort of a base plate on your mod, but when you're integrating into the map you can change the terrain textures and things like that to work for you. So for me this is not really going to be of any benefit, so I want to get rid of those. And obviously when you're deleting stuff from the Cinegraph here, if there are any user attributes applied and indexes and things like that, when you delete something it will mess up the structure of the index, so you need to be a bit careful. You can't just start deleting stuff randomly, but in this particular case, just because it's literally just a texture, it's not going to affect anything, so I'm going to get rid of that one as well. It might be worth just going through all of these, just having a look and seeing what's what in here, and deciding what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep and all the rest of it. So I've got all that. The clear areas, I don't need those because again that's just to do with the placeable. It sets up the clear area, so when you place the mod in the map it deletes the grass texture for you, so you don't have grass poking up through the mod and whatever else. But I don't particularly need that because I'm going to be placing it in the map. I can delete any grass textures and things like that would be interfering with it anyway, so I can remove that one. Now obviously in this particular case, because it's a placeable, that clear areas is controlled by an XML, an external XML, which will not be brought into the map, so it won't cause me any issues. But if it was something that was controlled again by an index, you might have somewhere up in here an index called clear areas, and it would be pointing to that particular index path. You would then need to delete the user attribute as well, because otherwise it would then see the index but it wouldn't be able to locate the actual index path because it's been deleted, so it would then throw up an error. So you need to be a bit careful when you start deleting stuff, but for the most part just look at your indexes in here, see what you've got, and then go through them and only delete what you really don't need and whatever else. Okay, so I've got rid of all that stuff. I'm going to keep all the other shaders there. I've got my sound, that's fine. Particle system, so we have some smoke particles which we'll need to bring in and change the path file name to and whatever else, but we're going to get to that in a little bit. Yeah, that's fine. So we have our player trigger and whatever else, inputs and outputs. So again we have a palette spawner with a path file name to an external i3D for the palette, so we'll need to change all of those parts as well and bits and pieces like that. So because I've deleted a couple of things, you could go into your material tab in Giants Editor before you actually delete it. So you could open up the material editing window, find out what the actual texture is in here by just hovering over it, and it will tell you what the texture is, and then you'll be able to locate that texture and delete it. But because this is called Bowden 3 and I know what that basically represents for that base plate, I can just go ahead and delete that anyway. So it's fine. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get rid of that one because I don't need that. But again, just be careful with textures and things like that. Make sure you're going to delete the right one, because otherwise delete the wrong one. It might look like it's the right texture and it's got a name that looks like it could be applied to the part you're deleting or the rest of it, but then when you actually do delete it, you reopen it again and you've got errors all over the place because you've chosen the wrong texture to delete, and it can no longer find it and things like that. So just be a bit careful when you start again deleting stuff randomly and whatever else. I'm going to leave everything else there again. Like I said, I'm going to apply this to my map and whatever else in the way I want to. So and then set up my ground textures and whatever else and decorative stuff around it, whatever, in the map. So I've now kind of streamlined the main mod, if you like, but the next part then would be to work with the external 3Ds and any particle systems and whatever else. So if I minimize that down for now, if we go back into the original barrel mod here, we've got our particle systems here, but if we look in the main mod itself, if we look in our PS transform group, we only have 2 particle systems, and both of those are smoke. They're using exactly the same i3D, so all of these other ones we've got in here, the fertilizer, the forage, and all that sort of stuff, again, are not required. We don't need any of those. We don't need any of these additional fill plane textures, and there's loads of different particle systems in here which we also don't need. So this particular mod as a placeable is much bigger than it actually needs to be file size wise, because there's a lot of redundant stuff in here that just isn't used by the mod itself, which is a bit weird why it's been set up and left like that, but whatever. So in here I'm going to just have a look to see what I require. So I need the particle system shader and the smoke particle DDS, so I don't have to bring over too much. What I'm going to do here is, if I go back into my folder, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm just going to call it PS, and I can copy over my smoke i3D shapes and the smoke particle DDS like so. So just make a copy of it because I don't want to delete anything from the original mod, because I may come back in here and find something, and if I start deleting everything from here, it might be something that I've forgotten to bring over, or whatever. So we've also got our particle system shader, so I'm going to make a copy of that, but I don't want to put that in here. I want to keep it structured somewhat with optimization in mind, so I'm going to put it into there. But because that's now in a different place, the actual smoke i3D needs to be pointed to that. So I'm going to open the i3D in here and put my ... because if I actually, from here I would need to go back one folder to my shaders folder to find my particle system shader. That's what the ... is for. It's telling it to go back one folder, but that's not quite enough there, because I now need to tell it to look in the shaders folder as well. So the ... there is to tell it to go back one folder, but I now need to tell it to look in the shaders folder like so. The smoke particle DDS I can leave behind, that's fine, so we can close that down. It's always worth just looking in your shader to see if there are any path file names in here to do with any shared textures and things like that. This one has none, so that's good, don't need to worry about any of that. So now I would be able to go into here, open this i3D, and I would have no errors, because I've linked everything the way it should be. And if I want to, I can come in here, press play, and I should get my smoke particle effect working correctly. Fantastic. So that's all good. So far so good. We won't need to save that, that's fine. So we've got our particle system and everything else. Like I said before, there's only the smoke particle, and they are exactly the same i3D, so we don't need to change anything there. It's looking in the PS folder under smoke i3D. If we look at our output, we also have our palette spawn, like I mentioned earlier. So what we need to look for here then, don't need that anymore, is the actual path file name and the i3D for our barrel palette, and this is actually in palette and then barrel palette i3D. So we also need to bring that in. So if we come back a step, we've got our palette here, and all the parts in there. So if we actually have a look in here, open this in Notepad++, we can see we've got some long path file names again. So for me, I'm going to actually change those because I don't like the idea of those long path file names again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so let's have a look what we've got here, because that's a folder with 1 texture in, and that's a folder with 3 textures in. So I don't want that. That to me just doesn't work. So I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it palette, spell it the way I want to spell it. Nothing wrong with the original spelling, but I like to have it spelt that way with a lowercase, so that's fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to literally copy all of this straight over like so. So we'll minimize that one, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all of these textures into one texture folder. So I'm going to take those, highlight them, Control X, and we'll put them into there. Then I'm going to take these ones out of this one, Control X, and put those into the texture folder for the palette as well. And then I'm going to actually rename the texture folder to textures, because there's actually textures in here, not just one texture. So now I've got rid of all of those, I can go ahead and delete the barrels folder because I don't need that. But obviously I need to rename all the path file names in the i3D for the barrel palette to point into my textures folder. So if I actually just take the textures text, we'll open this up in Notepad++, and I'm just going to literally overwrite these in here like so, because there's not very many, so I can just do it there. And we'll just add it in down here for these ones, and we'll just add an S on the end of there. So I've now renamed those, or changed those path file names to point to the textures folder for all of the textures that it requires. We can now close all that down. If we open this i3D up, we should have our barrel with no errors. Fantastic. And we have our barrels there, all looking good and everything, no errors. Lovely jubbly. So we'll close that one down. So we've got that part set up. In this particular mod, there's only one barrel palette spawn, there's only one palette spawn or whatever else. So that's all we need to do there. But we need to obviously update our path file name because I've changed the spelling of where it's located and all the rest of it. So for me now it's in palette and then barrel palette, not spelt the same way as it was before. So I need to change this in here. So we'll just go palette, tab across, and lock in that change. Okay, so if I save that now, it's always worth just closing it down and then reopening the main mod again, just to make sure that you have no errors with any change you make. Something might have got rejiggled around and then cause a problem and throw up an error, but we should be good there. So now obviously when I bring this into the map, these folders are going to be integrated into the map somewhat, so there will be some changes that will be made again in the i3D to path file names and things like that, because certain things will be placed in different areas and whatever else, but that will come later on. What I need to do now is sort of streamline the mod from what it was originally, but give myself a good solid folder structure to work with, so when I bring it into the map it will give me a much easier task to work with than what we have for the original folder structure like we have here, which is just a mishmash. Not going to worry about the cell point because that's something I can set up in the map, so I'm not really fussed about that one. So that's basically the first mod set up. I just want to double check something because I may not have done it yet. No, I didn't. So we're going to change the name here in the user attribute. I'm just going to take the attributes name here and put that into there as well. So it's now barrel fabric. So this will be named barrel fabric. When I do the whiskey one, that will be named barrel whiskey fabric. So it keeps them completely separate, not only in the scenegraph but in the actual user attributes as well. So I can go ahead and save that again, and we'll close that one down. Okay, so we now have our barrel mod all streamlined and whatever else, so I can move that one up out of the way. Now we're going to move on to take a look at the whiskey placeable fabric. I'm just going to open the main mod itself within Giants Editor. Again, like I did with the barrel one, I'm just going to export everything. So I'm going to go File, Export All with Files. Go back to the desktop, create a new folder, and obviously we're going to name this the same, or it's very similar to the barrel one. So I'm just going to call it Whiskey Fabric. And I'm just going to make a copy of that text. We'll open up the folder, paste it in. So this is my i3D name, save. Don't need to keep the parent directory structure. Again, like I said with the barrel one, I'm going to be creating my own structure. So I'm going to click no. We'll close that down, don't need to save it. Close that one down. So I've now got my whiskey fabric here, the new exported version, streamlined, whatever you want to call it. But you can see here we have a lot of folders, and some of these have a lot of extra folders. So this one in particular is going to be a bit more of a nightmare to work with, because there's going to be a lot of you know, in and out of folders and whatever else. And you may find that there'll be some duplicate textures that you might need to rename and things like that, so that they'll all fit into one folder and whatever else. So I'm going to open up the textures folder here so I can do the same like I did before and reopen the main folder. I want to bring all my textures again into one folder. So I'm just going to go through all of these and just find what I need to find and then bring it in. So if we go through these, we've got some textures in this one. So select all and we'll drag across. We'll move, that's fine, don't need to copy them. And then I can come back and delete that folder to make sure that I don't. So I know I've done that one already. So we'll go into this one, move that one, go back one folder, delete, and we'll take these ones, move them over, go back one folder, delete. This is a bit of a kind of repetitive, but you need to do this really to get it optimized and streamlined and whatever else to yeah, make it easier to work with once you get it in the map. So I can go back, delete that folder, select all, cut and paste. We have a couple of duplicates here, so that's fine. So material 1 DDS is the same as that one. So cancel that, because I've got a couple of duplicates here. I need to work with that, because you can see the shovel head, whatever you want to call that, is called material 1 DDS, and this is also material 1 DDS. And I've also then got this, whatever that is, material 2. That's fine, I've already got that, but I don't want to replace the shovel. I want to keep that, or whatever that is. I assume that's a shovel head, yeah. So I want to keep that. So for this one, I'm going to rename this, and I'm just going to add another one, so it's now material 11, and then that will allow me to cut that one and paste it in. Obviously I will need to change that in the i3D so it knows where to look for that texture, so I need to remember that I've changed that to 11. So keep it something simple. You could add a 0 so it becomes material 10, or you could add a 0 so it becomes material 01 instead of 1. Whatever is going to work for you to make it easy to remember, so that you can change the i3D later on. So we can come back, we'll delete that folder. Got a couple here, so again I'm going to Control X, come over here and paste, go back one folder, delete, go in here, Control X and paste, go back for one folder, delete. We'll take these, Control X and paste, go back one folder and delete. So we'll go back, what have we got now? So whiskey, mod, whiskey. Okay, so that's that entire folder section done, so we can delete that one. We've got some extra bits in here, new textures, got some extra bits. So I'm going to do the same again, Control X and paste, go back one, delete, go back one, delete. Textures, we need to take those. You may find that there'll be duplicates again here, so don't be surprised. So numbers is going to replace numbers, that's fine, don't need that. So I can now go back and delete that one. Shaders, that's fine. So that's all that's there, so we can delete that folder. Models. So Control X and paste, go back, delete the folder, go back, delete the folder, go back, delete the folder, go back, and delete the folder. So what was in here? Textures. So I need to select all of those, Control X, paste, beat, so that's slightly different because that's a sugar beet and the one that's already there is a maize. So I want to skip that one. They actually look the same. So we'll skip that, skip that. Okay, so I need to change this one because we have in this folder over here, maize is actually called beet. So I'm going to change that to maize, like so, which will allow me to then bring that one in. Okay, so I need to come into here, we're going to take those, Control X, come over, paste, so go back, delete that folder, shaders, that's fine, don't need that. So I think that was all that was in there, so we can delete that folder. Now we just have our palette, which is loads of textures in there, and there's more in there, so we need to do these ones as well. So let's take all of those, Control X, paste, get rid of that, delete that, delete that, new, textures. So we'll take those, paste, delete, 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 and that was the palette folder, so I can delete that one now. And shaders, that's fine, sounds, and textures. Okay, so I can close that one down. So theoretically now I've got all of my textures in one folder. There may be some that I've messed up or missed out, whatever else, so I can work with that when we get our errors later on, that's fine. Again, I'm going to change the uppercase S to lowercase for my sounds folder, and our shaders, that's fine. So need to do the same again, so I'm going to open up the actual i3D here in Notepad++. I'm just going to take the textures text, and I'm just literally going to highlight that one, Control F, replace, and replace all. So we have that one done. Then we'll do this one, copy, paste, replace all, and this one, copy, paste, replace all, and this one, copy, paste, place all, and this one, place all, textures, this one, place all, scroll down a bit, so we'll do this one, place all, and this one I'll just go delete the extra bits there, and we'll do the same for that one. What have we got? New extras, so this one I'm going to copy, paste, replace all, copy, paste, replace all, shaders, we can just get rid of that. Textures. So we do this for this one. Copy, paste, replace all. And then we can scroll down a bit further. Copy, paste, replace all. Barrels. Copy, paste, replace all. Shaders, shaders, textures, textures, textures. Okay, so all the rest of those look pretty good, that's fine. So okay, there's going to be a couple here which are not going to look right because obviously I've changed the name of them. The one that I changed, if I go back into my folder here, in the textures I've changed this one to material 11, so I need to identify that in the actual file ID here, and that's going to be the tricky part because we have material 1, so 59, that is and material 1 so if I take that, copy and do 11, find next, it's not going to find it in there because I haven't changed it yet. So we have material 1 up here, and we also have material 1 here. That's 60. So it's going to be a case of just changing one and then seeing if it fixes it, and if it doesn't, come back and change it back and then change the other one. So I'm going to take a chance to say it's this one down here. So 59, material 1, I'm going to change to 11 there. We'll save, close that down, and I'll open up the i3D and Giants editor. Now we've got a couple of errors here, so let's have a look and see what we've got. Okay, so the broom is there, so that's good. That worked. I chose the right one, that was a bit of luck. But there are clearly some textures here that are a little bit out of whack. That's fine. So what we've got then is if we go back into here, textures, SDC, textures, SDC 15, 21, and so the path is correct, I believe, but the actual textures aren't there. That's fine. We need to bring them over there, possibly as ones that I overlooked or deleted by mistake. We'll also change our sounds here to lowercase while we're here. That's fine, so let's save that, close that down, close that down. So if I go into my textures, SDC, and there's nothing in there at all, so we need to go back into the original because for whatever reason I didn't copy them over. So we'll just do that like so, and we've got them there. Not sure why they didn't come over, but that's fine. So we'll copy both of those in this case because I don't want to mess up the original, and we'll just paste them into here. So paste, close that down, and we can go back into here, open this back up again, and we should have no errors. Fantastic. And yep, there you go. So now it's looking correct. A couple of textures there that I didn't bring over or missed out or whatever else for some reason. but it's easily done. We've got some textures there, all looking good. Not sure what the shovel head was for. There it is. There we go. So that one's fine as well. It'll be a little bit of a time-consuming process, but again, in my opinion, very much worthwhile. In this particular case, I'm going to keep the ground texture because I think it adds to the mod itself. So I want to keep that intact. But again, I'm going to come in here in my shaders. I've got this rotor shader thing under the actual mod. I don't need that, so I'm going to get rid of it. And I'm also going to get rid of the clear areas again because I don't need those. Sound is fine. PS. Okay, so then what we need to do was save that, and we need to work with our particle systems and also our palettes for our whiskey barrel and our rum palette, or whatever it's called. Whiskey palette and rum palette. So we need to work with those next. So if we close that down, again we'll have a look in the original one here, and we've got our particle systems. Now in this particular case, this mod, the Whiskey Factory or the Whiskey Fabric, uses exactly the same smoke i3D as the barrel fabric. So we've already got that in this mod, so there's no reason to bring that into the map twice. We can link, once we've imported into the map, we can link this i3D, the Whiskey Fabric, to that same particle system. So I'm not going to do that twice. So I don't need that one, but I will need the palette. So we need both of those, and there's again loads of different textures in here that could be cut down and whatever else. Not quite sure if they're all required. Mod, whiskey, maybe. Okay, so I think what we'll do then is, like we did with the barrel one, we'll just copy over the contents of the folder, but I want to rename it, so I'm going to create a new folder and we'll call it palette, and we'll just copy the whole lot over. That's fine. Material holders, we'll bring over our fruit HUDs folder because that's got the HUDs in there. Scripts, I'm not going to worry about those because they'll be brought into the map later on. That's fine. And I need to change one of these scripts anyway. The new field type script is only to be used for placeable mods. It will not work as a Giants editor import, so I'm going to be using the reg field type script instead of the new field type script. The fabric script and the additional trigger script I will use, but the new field types one I'm not going to use that. I'm going to replace it with the reg field type script, but we'll do that when we get to the part 2 of the video where we actually get to import it into the map and whatever else. So we've got all of that, got that, shaders, whatever else. So I think we're pretty good there. I don't need that anymore. So I've set all this up. What I'm going to do then last, before we move on to the part 2, which will be in a separate video altogether, is to tidy this up a little bit because this is just a mess as well. So we've got one texture in one folder. Don't particularly like the idea of that, so I'm going to take all of these, put them into there. Now again, these textures will more than likely be exactly the same textures as what we have in here for our palette. You can see these are exactly the same, so you may be able to cut down on duplicate textures again. I'm not going to get into duplicate textures in the video because that is extremely time consuming, and I use a program called Duplicate File Finder for that, but it is a lot of takes a lot of time to go through each individual texture because it's looking for the actual name of the texture, and it will then find any duplicate textures of the same name. But just because they're named the same, we've already determined that with the other texture, the material 1, we had 2 material 1 textures, but they were completely different. One was representing the head of a shovel and the other one was representing the head of a broom. So you know, you can't go just by the fact that it's named the same. You do have to open them up and actually look at them to see if they are different or actual duplicates, and then just rename them appropriately. But I'm not going to get into that because that is very time consuming indeed, and I don't think a video would be of any use to anybody on that side of things. But this stuff I think may help with optimization of mods, and also you could use the same process for optimization of your maps as well. So I'm going to rename this folder to textures like I did before. So I'm going to take those from there, go back to palette, textures, and paste them into this folder. That's fine. So I can get rid of that, so we'll delete that folder. Textures, we'll take these, Control X, and we'll paste those into there. I think what I'll do is I'll do the same as what I did before, because it will allow me to delete the folders easier. So if we go back into here, delete mod whiskey, new textures, bring them over, and delete. Okay, so we now have one textures folder with hopefully all of the textures to do with the palette in that one folder. So now I need to basically just change the path file names for all of these to point to that one folder. So there's not many lines here, so I'm just going to literally type it in. Textures, copy, paste, paste, slash, slash. Okay, so it should be pretty good there. I've saved that, so we can close that down. Then if we actually open the run palette up, we should have our run palette with no errors. Fantastic. So I can do the same for the whiskey palette, so we'll just paste that into there. Whoops. Textures with S. Okay, so let's do that. We'll open up this one. Whiskey palette, no errors. Fantastic. So that's fine. We can now close that one down. Yeah, whatever. Save it. I might do the same with this one. Just save it in Giant Editor, just to update the i3D and whatever else, to clean it up and whatever. So I mean, there's not much in there, but sometimes by saving it, it rejumbles everything and kind of optimizes itself within the i3D. So we've now got fruit HUDs, that's fine. Palette shaders, we've got some shaders in here for the main building. Sound, we can reopen this one up again just to make sure that there's no errors, because we've made some changes in various areas. Sometimes that will conflict with something else, but we have no errors, so that's fantastic. Did I rename this one? No, I didn't. So I'm going to take the name from there, put it into there. So this one is now also Whiskey Fabric, and we'll save. So we've got two different mods we've streamlined and optimized and whatever else. We've renamed them to suit better, not only for the actual names themselves, but as in the i3Ds, because both i3Ds, the original i3Ds, were both called Fabric. So now they are designated slightly easier, so there won't be any confusion when you import them into the map. You'll be able to identify them much easier in the import process. We've also named them differently in the user attributes, so there should be no conflicts between the two of them once they're in the map and all the rest of it. Okay, so that's it for part one then, and then in part two we'll have a look at actually importing them into a map, and I'm going to make a few changes to some of the modding or some of the mod setup, because I think this particular one uses sugar beet, and I want to change that to sugarcane. because doing a Google search to see how whiskey and rum is created, sugar beet never came up once, but sugarcane did for a molasses substitute. So I want to kind of change some stuff in there to make that a little bit more realistic in the way it works. It won't be, completely realistic, but what is in farm sim really. But yeah, I'm going to just try and play around, and sugarcane doesn't get used enough, I don't think. So might be an idea to, with this particular mod, maybe utilize a bit of sugarcane to then work with that. So obviously your map would have to support sugarcane. So if you've got a mod map that doesn't have sugarcane on it, you would either need to add it in or leave it at sugar beet or whatever else. But I'm just going to use a Goldcrest Valley edit, so it will obviously have sugarcane in it. So I'm going to go with that and work with it. Hope to see in part 2 where we start to look into importing the mods into the map and get them all working. I'm ShyWizard, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.